It's an exciting time, and it's an exciting opportunity to create empowerment for our youth through sport, through arts, through recreation, through creating platforms and better support to our athletes, to our artists, in order so that they can grow and shine and accomplish and be recognized internationally.
Welcome to this edition of Free Talk, proudly brought to you in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation and Heart and Soul TV and Radio. My name is Blessed Mhlanga. Now, this week we'll be discussing with you a very amazing issue. You know, most of you who follow this program hear us talking mostly about politics and economy. This time we are going to be discussing sport, Zimbabwean sport, just looking at the just ended Olympics, where Zimbabwe failed to get a single medal in that showcase. Now, but we had a Zimbabwean who was at the Tokyo Olympics, and his team that he was leading at that showcase, sporting showcase, as a physiotherapist, scooped a number of gold medals, and one of the diving teams got a gold medal. Now, this is Gareth Ziyambi. Gareth Ziyambi is a Zimbabwean, son of a retired judge, Veneranda Ziyambi, and he's in studio all the way from the United Kingdom to discuss with us sport. Now, Gareth, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Beautiful. Yeah. Now, just tell us, just in brief, how you got there to be the head physiotherapist of Great Britain team and leading them in the Olympics.
Well, I think my journey actually started here in Zimbabwe, and I have to say our medical school, and particularly the physiotherapy program, which was started by my Dorcas Madzire, is excellent. We were trained, and the basics that we had really have carried me through even into my career elsewhere. So, always want to start to say that, what we have here is already very good. It's already of a very high standard. Sometimes what we just need was opportunity. But in terms of my sports physiotherapy, I actually started a lot here, and may not know, but I did go to the first two Olympics, 2004 and 2008 with Team Zimbabwe. So I was actually very fortunate there. Zimbabwe had a drought of medals since 1980. And obviously, Kirsty Coventry changed things for us both in 04 and 08. But even in 2008, we had a couple of fourth place finishes. Brian Zingai in the 200, Ngoni Makusha in the long jump. So it's not that we were short of athletes or the quality or the caliber of athletes. But after 2004, I went over to the UK. I really wanted to test my mettle against the best sports physiotherapist in the world, and I wanted to see where we stood, how we figured. And in 2006, I got a job in the English Institute of Sport. This is an organization which concentrates all the sports medicine and sports science personnel in a centralized format. And that way they then work with the different sports within Great Britain. And my initial remit was just working in a multidisciplinary across a number of sports, such as track and field, boxing, we had handball, tennis, and diving was obviously one of those sports. By 2009, we were asked to specialize, just to choose a sport we wanted to work with, and I ended up working with diving at that stage. So it's been a fairly long association with the sport. After 2010, I left the English Institute of Sport and I began to work for diving as directly. And I think there, the sport really transformed and went from the powerhouse in diving has always been China, but now Great Britain is ranked second. But in my time there, I was actually quite surprised to discover, and actually when I should have remembered this, but Zimbabwe has had a world champion in diving before. Was Evan Stewart. Yes, that's right. So it was actually everywhere I went, if I say I'm from Zimbabwe, it's, oh, Evan Stewart. I'm like, oh yes, that's actually true. So that was really my journey to get into diving. But really, it was based on the foundation that I had here, working really with high caliber athletes, including the Davis Cup tennis. Probably was my first real interaction with professional athletes, and the Black brothers and Kevin Elliott. They would come for those Davis Cup tennis ties, and they were very gracious in helping me to understand what they required and what they needed, what the standards were in terms of what they were used to when they traveled around the tour. And Kevin Elliott was even kind enough to donate a portable physio bed for me at the time, which they were great in that way. Yeah. But I think that really sparked my love for elite sport.
But you're coming from a family of a lawyer. Your mother was a respected judge.
Yes.
How did you move from because people normally are couched within the spaces that they grow. Yeah. How did you find yourself in sport?
Well, good question. Actually, my father, the late HStvZim, was also a lawyer, and that's how they met with my mother at law school. And it was interesting coming from a family of lawyers, and I thought to myself, I don't want to do law. And at some stage, I thought I'll choose between law and medicine. And I remember on my application to University of Zimbabwe, those were actually my two choices. But I'd always kind of gravitated towards the medical field. That's what I was really interested in. But at the time, it was the only medical school, and the entry requirements were very, very high. And I was offered physiotherapy, which I didn't know anything about. And I thought to myself, no, I want to be cutting people or prescribing drugs. What is this physiotherapy? And it wasn't something that was very well known at the time. But I think as I progressed within it, I really started to enjoy it. And even though I had the option to do medicine at a later stage, particularly when I started understanding the integration that physiotherapy has with sport. And for myself, I always enjoyed sport a lot. I played a lot of sport at school, and I represented Zimbabwe up to under 18 level playing hockey. So I already loved sport in that way, and this was a natural way for me to continue, because the opportunities to continue within sport were quite difficult at the time.
Yeah, having worked with Zimbabwe and gone with Team Zimbabwe to the Olympics, and now being with Great Britain, I just share with us the major differences that the culture shocks.
Yeah. I think the first thing what amazed me is the dedication and the time that's spent working. I had no concept of the kind of hours that people work, and when they say we have a 16-hour day, I'm like, what can you possibly be doing for 16 hours in a day? There's an incredible amount of dedication that is there. But really, in terms of the major differences, what I can say is that it's not talent. We have abundance of talent, and our school system probably is second to none in terms of the sporting facilities and the competitions that really help us to recognize that talent. Coaches as well. I think we have excellent coaches, and a lot of them have been at a high level and then have gone into coaching. But the big difference our athletes are exposed to once they leave is a dedicated team of sports medicine and sports science personnel that are just there to support their ambitions. And when our athletes they will tend to go to the US for the most part, and when they enter the college system, this is what they have. This is the single biggest difference. In the college system, your strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists, sports psychologists, athletic trainers, biomechanics, physiology, all of those are just dedicated to helping you get from point A to point B. So I think that was definitely, it's a very big and major difference. And this is what allows our athletes actually to really progress in leaps and bounds is this support. The second thing is that they're full-time. They just dedicate all their time to all the different disciplines that they need to improve physically and mentally, but also to the technical development within their sport. And I think the success really follows when your coaches and your athletes are full-time, because we can't become expert in anything if we're doing it part-time. And so that was the second big difference, is the fact that they don't have to worry about, where their next meal is coming from. And different countries have different ways of supporting, the athletes. In Great Britain, it's through the lottery. The government gets money from the lottery, and they assign some money to the different sports in order to do that. Some countries will utilize maybe the defense forces, and the athletes will enroll and become cadets, and they get on the payroll that way. With some, if it's in the US, it's either through the college system, and once you leave the college system, they find a lot of investors and sponsors in that way. So different countries have different systems, but these are the same things.
But do you think that with the talent, I noticed you went to St. George's?
Yes.
Do you think with the talent that we have in our school systems and the sports in Zimbabwe, we could get to be getting medals from the Olympics if we had a system that you talk about that helps athletes achieve their dreams and also make sure that they concentrate on sport instead of feeding themselves?
I think absolutely. And I think South Africa is a good example of this. I think they had a system where a lot of athletes were constantly going abroad, and they just found it very difficult really to keep sustained success. And at some stage they decided we need to develop homegrown competitions. We need to develop a support system. So you have the High Performance Center in Pretoria, for instance, and in Cape Town, where they started to attract all the best, sports medicine, sports science, the facilities for training. And you can see, like in the last Olympics, for instance, you have athletes like Wade Van Niekerk, who broke Michael Johnson's world record running from lane 8, but has trained and lived and competed so yes, he's gone abroad to competitions, but his training base is South Africa. But that's been a process, a very gradual process, and it's about identifying that this is what's needed. And I have no doubt that if we had such a system, we'd produce those athletes. And if we look at the professional sports, where how many people we exported in terms of rugby, cricket, football, that have gone to different countries. And even in the current England team, we have Zimbabwean-born players who went to school in Zimbabwe, but have continued once they've gone over. And I think, so for me, it's never been a question of talent, it's never been a question of the expertise that's here, because they obviously had good grounding in terms of their skills. It really is about trying to create that system. And this is the main thing that they're exposed to, is sports medicine and sports science.
Yeah. In Zimbabwe, we've had a lot of interventions in sport. You've got, if for a lack of a better word, political interference in sporting, where some powerful figures from somewhere instruct who should be in the team. And, tell us the difference that could be there in terms of that interference with the teams that you've worked with outside Zimbabwe.
I think certainly there is a difference, but I think when it comes to a national perspective, I think because you're representing a nation, you're always going to have those interests. In the United Kingdom, for instance, the money does come from the government, so the accountability is to the government. And there are very strict controls in how and monitoring processes that are in place to ensure that that money is not being squandered. And if you don't hit your targets, it's a very strict system. If you don't hit your medal targets, you will lose money for the next cycle. If you do, yes, absolutely. It's very much so. I think, you know, in that way, there is a form of control that's there. Maybe it's not direct, but certainly we are all under no illusion that if we don't perform and we don't produce the medals that we need to, these are public funds. They will be withdrawn, and you've got to then find a way to develop. The argument has always been, you know, is it counterproductive? Because obviously you need the money to progress, and if you take it away, the chances of, you know, continuing in that successful path become less. But I think, you know, from that point of view, when it becomes a national collective, and I think this we have to understand the different cultural maybe environments in each country. And each country has got to overcome those. In the first world nations, they've decided, well, there will be maybe more of a less indirect approach, but it's still very much there. When you go and you represent Team GB, it's very much a national interest. And insofar as there's going to be a national interest, there will always be, in my view, I think there will always be that interest.
Yeah, but you talk of national interest. You're Zimbabwean.
Yes.
You're representing national interest for Great Britain. Did you have challenges to get to that top post?
I think personally, no, because I find that it was more about, you know, proving that you have the caliber and the quality to do what you need. So yes, my pathway would have been a bit longer than maybe it would be for homegrown citizens, but I think, you know, if you speak to any Zimbabweans that have excelled, and there are many in the various fields, and I'm always humbled to read and to find out what Zimbabweans are up to, it will be a very similar pathway. I think you accept that if you're in Great Britain, you're not Britishers, and so the priorities and, you know, the opportunities that exist, you have to get. When you get the opportunities, you have to fight, you know, twice as hard. But you go in knowing that you're there to develop your own talent, and you're there to, one, prove to yourself that you're capable, and secondly, when given the opportunity, to excel in that, because the opportunities are few and far between. So when you get them, you've got to grab them with both hands. So yes, I mean, I do, you know, I think I accepted that my path would always be one that wouldn't be a standard one, but I think that's not that wasn't particularly an issue. What I think you want is the opportunity. And if you get that opportunity, it doesn't really matter how you've gotten there. What's important is that you've got that opportunity.
Do you think that we are affected as Africans and as Zimbabweans? We are affected because we want to hand people opportunities because of color and because of birth instead of because of talent?
Yes, I think that's definitely something we want to move away from. I think we are good enough. That's the bottom line. We are just good enough. And if we look at maybe go to Eastern Africa, you have countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, and where they exist. If we talk about track and field, for instance, they excel in those disciplines. And the competition to get those places is not based on their color, it's based on how good they are. And so they've got to, in fact, you know, we joke a lot that the national trials must be harder than the Olympic finals. Because, you know, it probably is the case, you know, fighting to get onto that. By the time they get onto the international stage, it's a different story. So I think each, you know, maybe the different countries have got their niche sports, and sports that they have sustainable success. And I remember even before I left, there was a question, which sports does Zimbabwe excel at? Which are the sports that do we need to concentrate resources in a few sports? And because if you look at it, we've had success across so many different sports in small pockets, but it's been a periodic success. Do we want to go down in maybe in East Africa and identify the few sports that we excel at and continuously go. If you look at a country like New Zealand in the All Black rugby, you know, that's what they're known for, is rugby, yes. And you know, the cricket now is also developed, but it's two sports that they've said we are going to focus on these sports, and they've gone in that direction. We're a big enough nation to have, you know, a multiple, you know, these are questions which are difficult to answer, but you know, at the end, they're the things that we need to consider going forward. But I certainly, you know, in terms of our selection processes and our talent pools and what, there's no reason to actually select people on the basis of color. We really need to be focusing on what we're good at.
Yeah, yeah, because I say this because remember we had this issue with cricket.
Yes.
Yeah, and I if you had an opportunity to just sit down with the Minister of Sport, with Kirsty Coventry,
yes,
what would you tell her to do right? I mean, she is an internationally renowned athlete.
Yes.
But you have worked in a different system, and you could advise her. What would you tell her?
Well, firstly, I think one of the things about the systems overseas is that actually the athlete is central to all of them. So they have to get to know all the different people that are working to support them. So I think in Kirsty's case, really what I'd say is she knows. she's been in that system. She's been the focus of all of those efforts. And I think the athletes become very self-aware in terms of what they need from the different, and they develop a responsibility and an accountability, whether it's sponsors, whether it's to governing bodies and administration, whether it's to sports medicine and sports science. So you know, I've had a number of conversations with Kirsty over the years, and you know, I can honestly tell you she already knows, particularly in a high performance environment. And you know, in her portfolio, she's got different, you know, you're looking at grassroots as well, and you're wanting to sustain grassroots sport, and then you're wanting to create competitions within the country that actually, once you're training people, they need to be competing. And then you've got your elite end. Now, unfortunately, the elite end is always a very small consideration, and you know, you've got to look at building things from the ground up in terms of.
But you said the ground up is fine. So our problem is the elite end, is it?
I think it is at elite end, and I think, you know, I've also I think the Zimbabwe Olympic Committee, you know, and it's interesting just looking at the different roles that the Olympic committees have around. Certainly, the British Olympic Association has maybe become more of a supportive organization to the elite sports. Obviously, when it comes to Olympics and things, they're the ones that are in charge. But really, they're allowing the sports to develop and just putting in place a framework to support them and their needs. So, for instance, at the Olympics, you know, we had a complete performance lodge, which has got the strength and conditioning, the nutrition, all of those things outside the village for the athletes to continue training. And
well, at least we're feeding ours with SADs.
Yes, which is good, by the way. But I think in terms of the elite end, I think it really does follow that once you have your grassroots in place, you need to have some, and the elite athletes need to compete. That's what they do. So whether the competitions we're developing, we used to have really good cricket domestic leagues here, and I think when we talk about you know, getting the black players involved, that was something that gave them the opportunity. You know, they were able to. You see some of the coaches that are coaching, you know, around the world, foreign coaches were coaching teams here in Zimbabwe, and use that as a, you know, maybe a springboard to coaching national teams in their countries. You know, I'm thinking of people like Jason Gillespie, for instance. You know, but you had someone that, and yes, you had those all coaching here. So what it did is it allowed our black players to be exposed to a high standard and then to develop and then competing against each other. By the time you get onto the national team, it's not a question of they're black and are they capable. It's a question of they've earned their place to be there. But their tutelage has been under the best.
You continue to talk about supporting the player, you know, the sports person.
Yes.
In Zimbabwe, there has been allegations that the player appears to be the last person in the consideration. Having worked in Zimbabwe, have you experienced that?
I think so, and maybe that's another major difference. It's not to say that the player is the boss, you know, but what you're trying to encourage is a sense of responsibility. At the end, it's the player who's having to deliver the performance, and they're the ones that know their bodies best. They know, and if you give them the education and you help them to make the correct decisions, then you've got a platform for sustainable success. It can't be driven from outside. At the end, you know, an athlete who's going to be an Olympic final is there alone. There's, you know, the coaches in the stands. We're all watching. They've got to deliver that performance. So I think in that instance, the more the athletes can take on a responsibility, and we talk of a partnership, you know, with them. I'm the one who knows the human body. I don't expect the athlete to know the human body in the detail that I know them, but I'm going to educate them as much as possible, because I'm only with them for a certain period of time. So if they have a training session and, you know, they injure themselves, do they know what they need to do? Do they know what pain is a good pain or a bad pain? And if it's a bad pain, do they know who to contact or what things they need to do, whether it's ice or whether it's to tape themselves or whether it's to say, I'm not sure that I can do 10 sprints, I'll do 3. This comes from education. And the more they know, the more they're able to make good decisions. And that's actually when you see the world-class athletes that are out there, they're really a lot more responsible in that. But I do think it's because responsibility has been given to them and they've been educated in that way.
With this vast experience and knowledge around sport that you have, what do you think you can bring, or do you have any plans in the future to bring to Zimbabwe and say, we want Zimbabwe to be on the top?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's been a dream of mine for a long time, and I think I've always tried to, you know, to keep in touch and to keep abreast of what's happening. And previous times when I've come, I've delivered lectures, and actually I was very encouraged to discover that NUST has a sports science program. And I actually went and I spoke to the sports science students there a few years back. And these are the kind of things that we need, because again, you don't want to import sports science. You want to bring the top sports scientists, and you want them to impart, you know, to our sports science. So they're always keeping abreast. But I, you know, from my having worked in those systems, my desire would really be to be able to impart that knowledge, have people an understanding of what it takes to get to, because sometimes that's all you need. If you know what it takes to get there, you can work towards that. And certainly to work, whether it's with ZOC or with Minister Kirsty, just to see what can we do, because there's also, I'm not the only one in sports medicine and science. It just so happens it came under the spotlight this time. But there are plenty, around. If we start to really harness that together, and we start to create the opportunity for people to come, whether it's they come back permanently or come back for periods of time to start developing. I think that's important, and certainly we're going to need a homegrown sports medicine, sports science, facilities that we can support those out, and we'll develop our own models. I don't think we need to just take wholesale from other. We have a in the UK, talent identification is a big process because they don't have what we have. We don't have to start there. We've got different things, and once we identify needs, certainly. But I'm certainly planning to be involved.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But as we look at this aspect of performance, we also need to look at the economy, the money.
Correct.
The money.
You
probably there because you also were looked after. And in Zimbabwe, we have seen a whole lot of problems where professionals like yourselves working remain poor, and the players themselves are even poorer.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
I think that's and I think in the UK we do make a distinction between professional sport and amateur sport. The professional sport, what you're alluding to, are very well paid. So if you remember, that's the money that comes there is not from the government. They're generating this money. So whether it's the Premier League and it's TV rights and it's merchandising and you know, you hear the kind of money that are paid for the footballers. But the staff that work in those environments are also very much part of that, and they get well paid. I think amateur sport is very different, and so, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's enough for you to, you know, to live and to do what you need to do. So for instance, I work part-time in elite sport, but I also have my private practice, and that helps me in terms of, but also it's because I like both aspects. I try to bring what we do in elite sport into just working with normal people. But this is a big issue, and I did say early on that if you want the best, at some stage your athletes, your coaches, your support staff have to be able to make ends meet just doing what they're doing, and that's the only way. You need a strong economy for that. So if we're looking at the priorities, you know, that exist, you know, for the government, maybe in the last few years that wasn't a possibility. But looking forward, you know, I'm very hopeful that as the economy is stabilizing, that some of these will become a possibility, and that because government at some stage needs to be involved. There isn't any country that does it, you know, where the government isn't involved in some way in terms of elite sport.
We've been accused, maybe sports administrators, having been the biggest Achilles heel in terms of this funding corruption.
Yeah. I mean, that is, you know, I think you have to have the confidence that if the money is going to be available, that it's going where it needs to go. And obviously, you know, we've seen, you know, over the years where there's been, you know, with cricket or with football, that maybe that was not always the case. And at some stage, we're not asking just the athletes and the coaches to be world class. You also need world class administrators. And it goes hand in hand. We can't, you know, we talk about success, you know, for a physiotherapist, but a success for an administrator is running an efficient organization, which and everybody prides themselves in their role, and that's the person who leads the organization to the we can't. It's not a self-serving thing, you know. They should be paid for. Obviously, we should be paid because we're working and we're delivering a service, but it shouldn't be self-serving. And as far as possible, when we're world-class in our administration, we're world-class in our athletes, and our coaches are world-class, this is the environment that's needed to move forward. Yeah.
Now, just as we close, how does it feel to be part of Team Great Britain and bring that success? You know, I saw there's this picture where you're standing with two amazing boys, gold medal, and you're in the middle. Yeah. How were you feeling at that particular time?
I think there were so many emotions, because it's, you know, first of all, we were just grateful that Japan actually had the Olympics. I mean, we've been so grateful to them that they allowed this opportunity. But you know, my first emotion is just pride that they were able to do what they do in training. It's a very difficult thing. You see them do it in training, you want to see them. You see your athletes run fast in training, but they don't do it in a competition. When they actually do it in the competition, that's when you're so happy, and that's the first one. The second, you know, obviously is, you know, in my own personal contribution is almost relief. It's a great feeling of relief that, because for instance, if I'm busy, that's not a good thing. As a physio, if you're busy, it means they're injured. That's not what you want at that stage. You want to get them to the start line and they're fit and they're not getting injured in the competition and they're just free to do that. So there's a great sense of relief with that. But the final thing is getting to that point, the amount of hours, you know, we spent, it's Saturdays, Sundays, evenings, it's a lot of sacrifice. And I think when you have that success, actually that sacrifice, you sit down and you think to yourself, it was worth it. And obviously the next day, the next time those athletes compete, the expectation is they win again. So you have to enjoy that moment for a short period of time, because the next time you go, you think of Usain Bolt, you know, he breaks a world record and he had to do it again and again. And every time he competed, that was the expectation. So in some cases, it's back to the drawing board. And what did we do well? Okay, can we find 1% in nutrition, 1% from physio, 1% from strength and conditioning? And we try and sum those 1% in order to improve the performances yet again. Yeah. So, yeah.
There was a young girl, Donato,
Yes.
from Zimbabwe in swimming. She's still just young.
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to talk to her, to see her and encourage her?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. I'd have loved to, and but you know, my plan is actually to do so anyway, because you know, it's those athletes that are our future. And you know, while yes, we talk about Team Zimbabwe not getting the medals, there are very few athletes that get medals at their first games. And I think, you know, even Kirsty will bear testament to that. That when you're athletes, you're looking at an 8-year journey. You know, if you're going to get to the top, we know now that you started, and there's milestones that you need to achieve along the path, which tell us you're going to get to that. And that's really what I'd want to you've got to keep that dream and that focus, and you've got to let that drive you. But you have to have the team around you, which is saying, right, you set those milestones, and each one that you achieve is. And I think also for her, having a team around her, which is also maybe deflecting some of the pressure. We can put a lot of pressure on our athletes when they're young, and actually what they need is support. And just building them up, and and each time they achieve a personal best, it's oh, that's great, it's fantastic. But the expectation, and you see with our top athletes around the world, you know, look at for instance Naomi Osaka is talking about the pressures that she has, you know, just having won a grand, and it's very, and these are professionals, so people who've got the money and big support teams around them, and still feeling that kind of pressure. So Simone Biles, another one, was really struggling with their weight of expectation. And someone like, you know, Donato was really young and clearly has that talent. She needs a good team of people around her that can shield her from that, but still allow her to develop. And behind the scenes, the ambition is very high and it's very strong, and you push every single day. And the best example I can give actually was Kirsty when we arrived in Athens, and having a chat with her coach, and I said, oh, so we didn't know. Like, oh, so what are her chances? Says, oh, she's been training really well. She's been getting really good times in training, so we'll see. Now, to me, that didn't say we're expecting a gold medal. So we were just like, okay, no problem. Imagine our surprise when we turn up, you know, we go to support, and, you know, first event, and she wins a bronze medal. Like, what? And all of a sudden, I'm replaying that conversation, and I'm thinking, okay, you knew, but what you were doing is you were just helping to maybe settle the expectation. And what it does, it allows the athlete just to go through their processes. By the time she won that bronze medal, the next time she was in the pool, we all knew, okay, this you know, she has chances to win more medals. But it is that managing expectation which is really important, but also pushing, yeah.
Amazing. And as I mean, I just want, you know, I just keep wondering, as you speak, you put this thing that there is a whole lot that happens behind the athlete.
Correct, yes.
Before we actually see them perform.
Absolutely.
Now, is this preparation put in our own sport? I'm just wondering, you know, I just keep wondering. Because I think sometimes it's just a call for footballers. It's just they're coming in, and the next day you see them on the field and we're being clobbered, you know. And now I'm just wondering, you sitting there and explaining, I'm thinking, do they even get that?
Well, this is this we don't know, and certainly when you look at if you're looking at Marvelous Nakamba, if he's going to come back, he's coming from Aston Villa. The setup that he's got there is it's phenomenal, and as soon as he finishes training, he's got all his recovery facilities, because from the moment you finish training, you're preparing for the next day's training. But not only that, the big difference is the amount of data that's collected around our athletes. We know how many hours they've slept, what their heart rates are. We know how many calories they're eating, how many calories they expend. I mean, we see that data in terms, they wear all the little vests with GPS data, how much they're running. We know how strong they are, how flexible they are. We know after a week of training where it should drop off to, and there's a lot of information that goes on around that. And between, let's say, the clubs and the English FA, when they go to national team, there's an understanding between the clubs and the FA that monitoring continues. The FA has their own system that they do that, but their goal is to, one, have the athletes perform at a high level, but return them to their clubs, because it's in their best interest, for that to happen. And I think the athletes maybe that are in South Africa are exposed to that as well, playing for the clubs, and so the athletes know and they understand the difference. But actually, what you want is a seamless process, so that they have confidence coming to play for the national team, knowing that they'll be as well looked after, and then they go back. Yeah.
Now, I think you just look directly to the people of Zimbabwe, and just talk to them about what you see in the future of our sports as Zimbabweans, and what should be done to make our nation, occupy some space of recognition.
Yes.
As you say, maybe if we have one sport that we excel at, or even if we're going to excel at, or what do we need to do? What is the salt that is missing in our meat?
Well, the first thing I'd say is ambition. We need to have the ambition. And, I was once told growing up that reality is made up of dreams. And, for those that are growing up and are playing sport and you're excelling at school, reality is truly made up of dreams. You've got to dream big. And it's those dreams that will sustain you in the future, and they guide your steps, where you're going to go, what your kind of service you'll demand around you to help you realize those ambitions. We need to have ambitions as athletes. We need to have ambitions as a nation, that this is where we want to go to. And until we have that ambition, we can always talk. We don't want to talk about medals when we go to the Olympics and we don't bring a medal. We want to be thinking, we know where 2024 is, we know where 2028 is, we know where 2032 is going to be. What are our plans? What is our ambition for 28 and 32? And when we set that ambition, we can start to look at all the things that, what do we need to get our athletes there? What facilities do we need? What coaches, what sports medicine, sports science do we need to get there? So I think that's the first thing, we get the ambition. But I also would want to say that we must have confidence in ourselves, confidence in our abilities, confidence in our knowledge, because we are a knowledgeable nation. Everyone that's out in the diaspora, yes, all they've had is the opportunity and they've excelled. We can excel just as well here. It's not the country that determines where you are. It's us as people that determine that. And so the second thing I said, we must have confidence in our own ability, because we can do it. Our athletes have done it. We've had coaches that have succeeded elsewhere, sports medicine, sports science staff that have done it. And certainly I think we can. And then I think the last thing is we must have a collective will to make things happen. We can dream, we can have ambition, we can have confidence, but we must commit to making it happen. And if we can do that all together, I cannot see any way why Zimbabwe cannot be one of the major powerhouses of sport in Africa and in the world. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, there was Gareth Ziambi making waves and raising the Zimbabwean flag with the team Great Britain. He's here in Zimbabwe, taking some rest with family, and also just going around and having talk. And we're fortunate enough here at Heart and Soul TV and radio to have him here to speak to you, the people of Zimbabwe. We are passionate people. We're passionate about our sport. We always wish and want to have international success. We saw how we supported Kirsty Coventry when she brought gold for us. We saw how we've been supporting and rooting for the Black brothers to the point that we call them Shumba. You know, we have seen how our athletes have succeeded in other countries. First, we had Bruce Grobler. We had Peter Ndlovu, we had Benjani Marwari, now we have Marvelous Nakamba, we have Famba, Tino Kandewere, and they're all doing amazing. We've also succeeded in a lot of other endeavors outside Zimbabwe. This is in business, be it in academia and stuff like that. It hurts us that most of this success that Zimbabweans are doing it when they're at their home country. We need to change that. We need to have our Zimbabweans earning money as professional sports players in our country and bringing success for our people. And Gareth, sport is $1 billion industry.
Absolutely. It can sustain itself.
So we need that here. This was the Free Talk with me, your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, talking anything sport for today with Gareth Ziambi, the person who could have been a lawyer but is now successful with sports. Thank you very much, Gareth, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you.
We wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. This was the Free Talk, proudly brought to you in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation and Heart and Soul TV and radio. We believe that dialogue is the crux of development. When people talk to each other, when people listen to each other, development happens. On Free Talk, we believe in political dialogue, economic dialogue, and social dialogue. Everybody must be heard. Everybody has a right to be heard. Free Talk, talking that moves nation. Free Talk, talking that makes a difference. This is the Free Talk.